Good morning, good afternoon. My name's Stuart Reed, and I am a professor at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. And I'm here on behalf of my co-authors, Nick Dew, who's at Naval Postgraduate School, Rob Wiltbank, who's the CEO of a technology company in Portland, Oregon, and Sarah Sarasvathy, who is on the faculty at Darden, University of Virginia. And just want to answer some of your questions and talk briefly about a paper which is entitled Entrepreneurial Expertise and the Use of Control. What motivated us, and there were three or four pieces that come together. One is effectuation, and effectuation is inherently a theory of non-predictive control. The second is strategy. And in 2006, we wrote a theory piece for the Strategic Management Journal, which is entitled Making the Case for Non-Predictive Control. And really in this work, what we were trying to do is put our money where our mouth is and say, well, okay, we argue a lot for control, and we argue that it is the alternative lever to prediction, but let's see if it's really true. Let's do some empirical work and take a look at it. And so that was the very simple motivation for it, and it isn't something that people in management have really taken a look at, which is how people use strategies of control. Because it was brand new, looking at control, it was hard to find existing scales or instruments to try and measure it. And the project is something which actually took us about 15 years by the time we were all done, from start to finish. It's something that Wiltbank and I started when we were doctoral students, trying to measure this. And building scales and instruments is work that requires many iterations. And finally, what we arrived at, which is what's in the paper, is the approach of taking different situations and asking people the same questions about what they would do in those situations, and manipulating the situations according to the level of predictability in the situation and the level of controllability in the situation. So on two ends of the spectrum, for example, and we created, for example, a wearable computing company, which of course today sounds mainstream, but 15 years ago it was a very low prediction kind of an environment, little technology company that really forced people to look at the problem, knowing that there was no way to predict the outcome, but also knowing that because technology, it's something that you could control. So that was, for example, our high control, low prediction scenario. And we created three others that round out the 2x2 of high and low prediction and control. And then we asked people the same questions of, okay, what would you do? And in a series of 7 questions, we gave people alternatives of, would you do market research? That's use prediction. Or would you try and find a partner who will help you create the future? And that's control. Like I said, it took us a number of iterations, but finally with this instrument we got very high reliability on it. People responded to the manipulation correctly, and also the items hung together, and so we were able to analyze it. Starting from the effectuation standpoint, and which is also related to the idea of expertise, we wanted to be able to examine how different expertise predicted or is associated with different uses of strategy. And so we gathered up a wide variety of different subjects: expert entrepreneur subjects, who are people who've had more than 10 years starting new ventures; expert corporate subjects, who are people who've spent more than 10 years managing in a Fortune 500 kind of a environment; novices, who basically MBA students who know very little, and we even found a group of people who had done both new ventures and had lots of experience in bigger companies. So we actually had 4 groups. And we presented them all with the instrument and compared their results. And what we found is that there's no difference really in how they all use prediction. Basically, along the way, it seems like everybody learns how to predict. Everybody learns how to forecast and use a spreadsheet. But the real differences were in how people use control. And the expert entrepreneur subjects were much better, significantly, statistically significant, better at identifying a situation that was not predictable and then matching it with strategies that don't use prediction, matching it with strategies that use control. And they scored consistently much better on that than any of the other groups. So, for example, our little wearable computing company. So that's a low prediction, well, at least, well, even now it's a low prediction, but certainly 15 years ago, it was a low prediction kind of a situation. You and I couldn't even today say what the market's going to look like for things like Oculus Rift and things like that. They didn't even exist then. So the idea of doing market research and looking at historical sales data and these kind of things is kind of irrelevant for that particular situation. And so, however, even despite that, the corporate people with corporate expertise, they still want to do that. They still want that. I mean, and you can't blame them, right? I mean, it's the blood they live off of, right? But instead, the expert entrepreneurs are much more likely to say, oh, okay, forget that. We're going to try and do something which is going to let us exert some more control, whether it's talking with potential partners or trying to start with the things that I have available to me. I mean, and this relates to things that are associated with effectuation. They were just much more likely to choose those actions versus use a spreadsheet. To me, there are three different takeaways from this. The first is, and I'm sorry, it'll have to be a few sentences. Is that okay? All right. I'll start that one again. To me, I think there are three useful takeaways from this for practice. The first is that what expert entrepreneurs learn in the course of the acquisition of their expertise is substantively different from what pretty much everybody else learns. They learn how to shape, they learn how to control. And that's useful because it means what we should teach them is probably different. It means that when you go and acquire that little firm into a big Fortune 500 company, you have two very different sets of expertise that you have to merge together. And it means that the things that they'll actually do are substantively different from the things that people do in big companies. And I think that's pretty important for both people working in small companies and big companies, and also what we teach. And that, like I said, that feels at least somewhat relevant to what we do. I think you could follow it on and say that it's useful to also know that in a post hoc test, our fourth group, who are people who had both worked in big companies and started new ventures, still heavily preferred prediction, which means that prediction is something which is such a mainstay of what we teach or learn. It seems to sort of trump everything else. And so I think it's important to be careful of that, because if you're a new venture person, it's easy for I'm not doing a good job with that one. But basically, it's easy to go work for a big company and forget what's important about small companies.